In May this year, India witnessed the birth of the 100th unicorn. As per government data, India has over 69,000 startups recognized by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. India has a vibrant startup ecosystem that is high on innovation. More importantly, it's creating jobs, but it has its own challenges. Among them, finding the right talent and slowdown in funding. Hello and welcome to Economic Times India Inc Boardroom, a virtual gathering and exchange of ideas between India's top corporate decision makers. Join us with deep insights from key industry leaders who are spelling out strategies that will drive growth. I'm Aloni Bhatt, and the focus today, startups and entrepreneurship. In the sessions today, we'll take a closer look at health tech. Is it the sector with the promise of the next $100 billion startup opportunity? In another session, we'll look at the talent crunch facing startups. How are they managing to find the right people for the right jobs? We'd like to thank our partners, Commercify, our associate partner, and global management consulting firm, Bain & Company, our knowledge partner.
Hello and welcome to ET India Boardroom. On this panel, we will be discussing health tech, the next billion-dollar startup opportunity. Our panelists for today are Dr. Kamini Walia, scientist at the ICMR in New Delhi, Ashutosh Garg, who's author and founder of Guardian Pharmacy, and Gaurav Agarwal, the co-founder of Tata 1mg. Gaurav, let me start the conversation with you. As 1mg has evolved from being an online pharmacy to more of a broad-based health tech player, how have your individual perspectives on the pharmaceutical value chain, how has that changed, and what are the newer opportunities that you see emerging?
Thank you for having me on this panel. This is a great question. I think for us, even back when we started 1mg in 2015, we were very clear that we weren't a pharmacy company, we were actually an integrated healthcare company. And 1mg's vision statement since the time has always been to create an integrated healthcare platform that made healthcare understandable, accessible, and affordable. In 2016, actually, we started in 2015. In 2016, we actually integrated diagnostics into our platform. We always started with content. We also integrated consultations. And since then, we've been operating an integrated platform. Pharmacy, of course, commands the lion's share in terms of mindset and also revenue in the Indian healthcare ecosystem. So I think more than 1mg platform's transition to health tech, I think it's the consumer and the ecosystem sort of transition that has happened more from just pharma to actually health tech. Now, if I think about what opportunities are emerging, I see that overall we are seeing a deepening, like a massive deepening of the health tech healthcare ecosystem in the country. And if we start from the payer side, we are seeing a deepening on the payer ecosystem in general around insurance. Typically, we've always seen insurance as a simple policy, and people switch policies every year. They switch probably to the cheapest policy, but we are starting to see more and more nuanced policies coming around, ones that have benefits, ones that give you micro sort of use cases, micro insurance use cases, etc. One that gives you, other healthcare access points, give you outpatient insurance benefits, underwrite some of additional risks around your health, right? So the payer ecosystem itself is undergoing a huge change, and 1mg is deeply involved with that ecosystem as a benefits layer. If you come to the commerce, the therapy area, then that itself is deepening, where I think the horizontal space of e-commerce in health is maybe taken to a large extent by the likes of Tata 1mg and Pharmacy, etc. But we are seeing deepening in therapies. So today you have a ton of providers doing diabetes reversals, diabetes disease management, etc. We could not imagine technology-enabled categories like this to exist maybe 5-10 years ago, but today they are there are enough takers. And all of this is built on top of, let's say, the ecosystem that the likes of 1mg have gone out and built. where the commerce layer is at least taken care of really, really well. I think an additional opportunity that's emerging is we've always known that that data is the holy grail of healthcare, right? The problem in India has been that digital data is just inaccessible. It doesn't exist, right? And I keep giving this example that when I go to my parents' house and they go see a doctor, they take out these files, which are like 10 years old. They find the right documents, right papers, and always something's missing. Now, what's happening and what maybe a lot of us are not noticing is the likes of 1mg are starting to generate and have been generating tremendous amounts of this data. And what's beautiful is that all of this data is digital. 1mg today sits on billions of healthcare data points around across pharmacy, diagnostics, consultations, and we can bring and we can build for the first time a longitudinal view of health for a user, right? And that in itself will just generate a tremendous set of opportunities across the ecosystem. So overall, I think the opportunity set is deepening from commerce to therapy to supply chain. I think there's just tons of opportunities happening, and it's actually a great time to be in the healthcare ecosystem.
Excellent, excellent. And let me pick up on that. And Ashutosh, if I come to you, Guardian was one of the first really to start off on the organized retail pharmacy journey. And if you look at it, the India pharma supply chains did have and still continues to have challenges around demand forecasting, inventory levels, expiries, and so on and so forth. In your journey, how relevant has technology been in terms of helping solve some of these issues and really introduce more efficiency in this value chain?
Thank you, Maria, for inviting me. I mean, I enjoyed listening to Gaurav's comments about 1mg, and I think you guys are doing an amazing job in building the pharma, the healthcare ecosystem in our country. But let me try and share with you some perspective from Guardian. I exited from the company 5 years ago, but I do stay in touch, and you're absolutely right. When we started in 2003, we were one of the early movers in the organized retail chain. I think it's very important for our viewers and listeners to understand that there are two distinct segments available as far as the pharmacy business is concerned. One is the 800,000 shops that are there across the entire country, which cater to the needs of one tablet of crocin, one tablet of an antibiotic, etc., and across the whole country. And the other is the pharmacy players, the e-pharma platforms, where I've also started to go to, because I find that I can buy large volumes and get a 20% discount. But having said that, let's look at some of the basic problems that exist in the pharma supply chain. And the most important one is that the pharmacy business or the pharmaceutical business, for its own strange reason, does not have any barcodes. And I think that's the first and biggest challenge to managing any kind of supplies for every single strip. I know in Guardian, we used to struggle to stick our own barcodes. It was all done manually, and you will end up, because of manual errors, you will have the wrong barcode pasted on the wrong strip. So first one is the barcodes. Second is if you look at the basic supply chain that exists in a city like Gurgaon, and I live in Gurgaon, where there are some 650 odd shops. From the distributor to the shop, the guy goes on a motorcycle or a cycle with multiple plastic bags, and each plastic bag has the requirement of the medicine of each shop, which is delivered by hand. So the whole question of being able to deliver large volumes to shops, it doesn't exist. Third point is that because there is very little barcoding, because there is very little technology intervention, and the value of the medicines is high, the majority of the losses that are taking place in every shop is pilferage of medicines, right? It's a very, very cash product that is going on. Fourth point is that stock taking is a serious issue in a shop. Most shopkeepers, most chemists or pharmacists, do not have the ability to do a physical count of their shops. The next point is that because substitution is not allowed under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, you go into a shop and you will probably find 30 different types of the same salt, because it is being, every doctor sitting around the shop is prescribing differently. So it's a slightly long-winded answer to your question on how can technology be used. I think technology needs to start with first the manufacturer and the pharmaceutical industry to say, let me start to put a barcode on every single strip that is leaving my factory. And also remember one simple thing. I mean, I worked in multiple businesses. This is the only industry that I spent 15 years of my life in, where the manufacturer has no interest in the consumer. Manufacturer is only interest in the person who's writing the prescription. The person who's writing the prescription does not know who the patient is, and he knows who the patient is, but that prescription goes to the chemist who has zero interest in what the patient is doing. So, this defeats all logic from the manufacturer to the brand owner to the supply chain to the consumer. So I think there's a lot of basic changes that need to be made in the pharmaceutical retail business. And while I would love to say that, the pharmacy players or the e-pharmacy platforms have been able to do a lot of good things, I think getting to the 1.4 billion people and making sure that their medicine needs are met will still be met by small shops.
Right.
And I'll stop here.
Right. No, thank you for that provocative ending as well. And maybe Gaurav, if I can come back to you with one of the things that Ashutosh mentioned around just, is e-pharmacy really improving access beyond geographies where anyway there was access to a neighborhood chemist? And how, even to the point that you were raising around therapy and improving health, do you see these platforms fundamentally improving health? Or is it primarily about, availability, convenience, affordability, those aspects?
Look, improving health is a complex beast, right? Medicines are just one portion of improving health. And, I agree with a lot of what Ashutosh has said, but if you look at and we've been shocked when we looked at this data, but over the years, we've had a lot of interest from organizations that do real impact work in India. For instance, the Gates Foundation, etc. And at one point, when we looked at what 1mg's reach is in actually far-flung areas of the country, we were shocked at how much reach there is. Because in these far-flung areas of the country, the core problem is access, right? Healthcare, as we all know, accessibility is a huge problem in a country like ours. So, tier 3, tier 4 cities that we've never heard of, they are probably the fastest growing cities on 1mg platform. And the reason they are fastest growing areas is because, we have a website which is multilingual. It starts to cater to their language needs. Technology is a great enabler. Everyone can access the same brands across the country. There's logistics service that's available. And those are some of the fastest areas of growth. Probably 40% of our business comes from these tier 3, tier 4 places. And we're not just a metro phenomenon as, most, even we used to think at one point until we started to look at our data. So I think the other point to add, and Ashutosh is absolutely right, I don't think any ecosystem can survive without small businesses, but there's also a lot of value in consolidation that happens. A large part of why Indian pharma retail continues to stay probably subscale is because it is fragmented massively, and at an individual small pharmacy shop level, the costs don't make sense to build in technologies of scale, right? You can do it at a Guardian where you put your own barcode, but for an individual shopkeeper, there's just not enough scale money to start to have barcodes make sense. So I do think that, today e-pharmacies are maybe constrained. We definitely need both e-pharmacies and offline pharmacies to meet the needs of Indians. we are seeing a lot of, omni-channel is the new word. We truly believe that to actually meet the accessibility needs for the country, we need to be both online and offline. And across the board, there are lots of experiments going on to enable offline. But we have made already a significant dent in providing access to tier 3, tier 4 folks, even with the platform we have today. And we are going to continuously improve that access as we move forward.
Excellent, great. Thank you for that. And with that, let me also bring in Dr. Walia. And a large, and especially in your position as part of ICMR, I think it's no surprise that a large part of the Indian population is underserved when it comes to matters of health. There's low diagnosis rates, low treatment rates, lack of infrastructure, lack of doctors, or we know all of these issues. From an ICMR perspective, how do you think about increasing really access and availability in the tier 3, tier 4 cities that Gaurav mentioned? Getting the drugs there, and seems like that part is certainly growing. But how do you increase overall access to care? And do you see changes in terms of how people are using technology to diagnose diseases or to consult doctors remotely? How do you think about technology and the role that it could play beyond the larger cities?
Good evening, and thanks for inviting me to this very interesting suggestions and share the ICMR perspective. Yes, I did hear the viewpoints of the previous speakers, and I learned a lot from understanding that we are already making inroads into the tier 3 and 4 cities, and that has always been a concern. The last mile is always a challenge, but last mile is still very far for us. We still haven't reached there. It is not something that we can't imagine that the government schemes and interventions really don't go beyond the urban settings or the metro cities. But then government has been focusing a lot in last few years on the universal health coverage, and some programs like free drugs and diagnostic initiative has been one of the key programs which have been initiated in 2015, and subsequently many states today are actually providing free drugs or free diagnostics to their populations. But supply chain has always been a problem. Even if you have a diagnostic, and there is a central supply for that, how do you really ensure that it reaches where it is supposed to reach? The supply chain, the last mile connectivity and availability. And also many a times when we talk about innovations in India, and how we should be able to utilize that and how to bring more partners into innovation as well as the manufacturing. We talk about the volumes, but then how do you really come up with the volumes if there is no demand for it? And that's what I think these disruptors in the health technologies, they will be able to give us a fair kind of an opportunity that we reach the populations who need them the most. And we have already seen that happening in COVID. Initially, when the app was launched, I was myself apprehensive. The app was in English. How is someone, the COVID app where you were supposed to register and through which you were going to access the vaccine program, how are you going to do it? But then once you raise these challenges, I have seen that these challenges do get addressed. So these disruptors are something, they will provide us opportunities, but then they will also provide us a lot of challenges with which the current healthcare system has to keep up with. For example, we are everyone these days is wearing that the fitness devices where you are capturing your steps, it is capturing your heart rates, your blood pressure. But then where is all that data going, and who's monitoring that data? And that data is actually can be provide a very good insight where you need the prevention interventions to be focused. So there is a lot of constructive stuff, I think, that can be done with these disruptors that we all are technology disruptors that we are discussing today. And the other most important thing is, I think, what quality of these devices or diagnostics or the drugs which are being provided on these platforms. I would just like to raise one issue here with 1 milligram and the online availability of, not singling out 1 milligram, please don't take an offense to it, all such platforms where antibiotics are made available online. I really hope, I have never accessed them online, so I don't know, but I hope we are insisting on the prescriptions, and because there are some antibiotics which can be made available on the prescription only. So these are, because I coordinate the antimicrobial resistance program, and we see how antibiotics are being consumed all across the country. They are replacing the paracetamol or vitamins, as they say in some situations, even when they are not needed. So that's why, I think these technology disruptors in healthcare are most welcome. They will definitely help us in the broad-based transformation if we are able to deal with them well. But then I think the policy and the regulation also needs to keep up with the technologies that we will be seeing in future.
Great, and we will come back to that question on policies and regulations. But Gaurav, if you want to come in,
I can just address one thing, because I want to make sure. I can say this on behalf of actually the online pharmacy industry. And we all know how the offline pharmacies operate in terms of access to medicines with or without prescription. So I won't go there to comment. But when it comes to online, we are actually very, very stringent on prescriptions, because everything that you do online maintains an audit trail. So every medicine that we dispense, every order that we take is actually against and meets all the laws of the land. There are prescriptions. In fact, we, more than prescriptions, we also have very stringent guidelines on the duration, etc. We cannot dispense beyond. If a prescription is old, we don't even entertain those prescriptions. So I just wanted to put that out here and give you that comfort that probably safer than any other pharmacy mode that exists in the country today.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification, Gaurav. But if I continue on one theme which Dr. Walia picked up, because just using CoWIN for registration, and that was a great example of how digital came in to make sure that we actually had records for the whole nation almost with specific UHIDs, etc., and so on. Ashutosh, in your experience, as you think about healthcare more broadly and not just pharma, how open and how receptive really has the ecosystem been in terms of adopting digital tools and digital technology? And there have been, the financial services sector or in some senses the consumer sector, they have seen more rapid adoption of technology than necessarily healthcare has. Why do you think that is, and what needs to change?
I think, Pajat, the example that Dr. Walia gave of vaccines is a very, very important factor. And I served on the board of Gavi for 8 years as a member of the executive committee, and I continue to be a Gavi board ambassador. I think, the example that she gave of CoWIN is probably spoken about all over the world because of the incredible way technology was used by the government, but even more important, how every single human being in our country using their own smartphones or even their regular phones was able to access a lot of the technology and make sure that their records were correct and so on.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think technology. If you look at healthcare as a large block of business, it is a huge number of things. Whether it's starting with hospitals, whether it's tertiary hospitals, or even the private or one and primary health centers on the other, whether it is imaging, whether it is laboratories, whether it is vaccination, whether it is even appointments that a company like Practo was doing, started off for doctors. I think the technology is coming in a very, very big way. And I believe, platforms like Gaurav's platform are just forerunners of what we in India will begin to see in terms of how technology will change the lives of the common person. I mean, I've been talking of telemedicine for the last 30 years. The large satellite companies, including a Hughes Network Systems, etc., used to talk of those huge VSAT-based telemedicines. But today, I see doctors conducting surgeries using robotic arms, etc., and a whole lot of other things. So I do believe that the technology this is just the beginning. I do believe that we in India have the positivity and the ability to be able to grab latest technology. We have generally managed to leapfrog one generation every time something new comes up. I'm a great supporter of what our government is doing now in terms of healthcare and how it's opening up such a large number of opportunities across different spectrums of healthcare. So I just believe that things will be positive. You got whole artificial intelligence coming in. I was, interviewing somebody on my podcast platform, and they actually have started to build Indians overseas have started to build devices to be able to train our own brain, which is then managing to make significant changes in the way our brain is going to respond to our own internal challenges. If you look at traditionally devices, in Indians basically had a glucometer, a thermometer, a blood pressure meter, which are the only three devices, and maybe a stethoscope which a doctor used. But now suddenly there is a plethora of devices. Dr. Walia spoke about the watch that we are all using, fitness, etc. But there are more and more devices coming, and Indians are at the forefront. So I think the healthcare industry using technology is just about beginning to see early gains, and the upside is going to be very substantial.
Got it. And Dr. Walia, if I can come back to you with your perspectives on this, that technology will certainly play a very big role. I think we are all in massive agreement on that. At the same time, I think the lack of digital data or the lack of integrated information across different stakeholders, insurance companies, doctors, hospitals, patients, that certainly has been a challenge that we have grappled with as a country. Now, one of the things that the government has spoken about is the digital health mission, and then now more recently about the UHI. If you can talk a little bit more about what are the possibilities you see with UHI, or indeed with some of the digital programs on health that the government is looking at.
So I will not be able to address the digital health mission because that is not something that I do, but then I can definitely talk about how the digitalization can actually benefit the healthcare program in our country. So there is no second thought to it that, the digitalization has been delayed. I mean, we are already late at digitalizing our healthcare system. In fact, private sector hospitals have done very well on that, and whosoever we work with are actually, they have sometimes their own, every hospital has their own IT system through which they collate the patient records, whether it is diagnostics or whether it is the treatment given or the length of the stay and everything. I have seen in India hospitals which are pretty much paperless. And those hospitals can actually help us, get past this challenge of not being able to digitalize our healthcare facilities. And that actually leads to a lot of problems. We are not able to, as I said, the supply chain is a problem. Disease burden assessments is a problem. You can put diagnostic machines in district levels, but then if they are not really connected to your any central facility. Even surveillance is a problem. So something as basic as surveillance of a disease cannot happen if you don't have an IT system and if digitalization is not there. But now there is, I think COVID has been a great teacher for all of us in all aspects, especially the healthcare. And we know that we need to, if we want to supply certain diagnostic tests to a certain place, at least we want to know what is the population which is going to require it. Because for the vaccine, the mandate initially was very clear, 18 and above. Sorry, for some 40, 45 and above, and later it shifted to 18 and above. And then that's how we use our IT systems. But now I think government is focusing on that. And once that happens, we will really benefit from it at an individual level, at the level of the hospital, as well as at the level of the government. One of the key challenges for the government, I think, is whenever we talk about lower, allocations, funding allocations, where is the burden to really ask for? That evidence is not there. Anecdotal evidence sometimes it really doesn't work. If this is the evidence that, okay, these many people are going to be affected by diabetes, these many people are going to be requiring some surgeries, that's where the Ayushman Bharat has to put the money. And that's why what I think will be one of the key accomplishments from having an extensive digitalization of the healthcare systems.
Got it. Got it. Gaurav, if I can come to you with a parallel question, which is, some of these challenges that we are seeing in India, and they are not unique. I mean, the scale is probably certainly different in India, but there are, similar challenges have been seen in other parts of the world as well. What are some learnings that you think we could actually look at from other markets, whether it is in terms of the core business model itself, or whether it is just in terms of initiatives for digitalization, initiatives for interoperability, initiatives for kind of making sure that we have shared at least anonymized data and so on. What are some learnings that we could use to leapfrog, as Ashutosh was saying earlier?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a tough question as well. Countries are at different stages of evolution when it comes to healthcare, digital data, etc. And that's one area where maybe I'll disagree a little bit, because even though the data might be digital, so there are two parts to the data problem, right? One is your data digital, right? And the second is, can it be accessed to actually draw any reasonable conclusions, right? And we all know that in countries like the US, for instance, the problem is not the data not being digital. The problem is actually that the data can't be accessed, right? Under these very, very constrained laws, which claim privacy and then don't even share anonymized data, right? And basically gives healthcare providers sort of control over patients because the data is inaccessible. And, I lived for many, many years in the US, and when we were moving back to India, we actually wanted to move our data back too, because, my wife was pregnant at the time, and we were like, hey, we want all her records. And what we got? Even though all the data with the hospital that we used to go to was digital, we actually got 400 sheets of printed paper, because that's the only thing they were allowed to give. And we actually went to our workplace at the time, and we basically scanned 400 sheets of paper and ended up with the PDF, right? So even though Western countries have done a great job digitizing ecosystems, that data is not accessible. And I think that, going back to Ashutosh's point, I actually do think that India has a real shot at leapfrogging not just the digitization of data, but actually the accessibility of data, right? Because we are creating laws and frameworks today when this is a recognized need, and the downsides of that system are reasonably well understood. I think the second thing is that I think we can learn is what are more than what provisions are there. I think we can learn what ecosystem enables this move towards digitization, sharing of data, movement of data seamlessly. And I think it's really important, in my view, to have a very robust payer economy, right? And the problem is that because India is a retail paid healthcare market, there is really no strong force that can actually push hospitals hospitals are digitized today, but almost every hospital uses its own health information system. The data is not transferable. So I can't go from hospital A to hospital B, have my records seamlessly transfer. And so actually the care that I got in one place, that history is not useful in the other place in the same way. If you look at standardization of data like ICD-10, LOINC, ICD-10 for diseases, LOINC for diagnostics, India doesn't use any of those frameworks today for the most part. So I think that what we can think about is less provisions and more ecosystems that are needed to actually move this journey forward. I think a lot of what's happening on the NDHM side, because now the government is becoming one of the biggest enablers for one of the largest populations, right? And if you want to play in the 500 million people population, right, which is half the freaking country, if you want to play in that ecosystem, you've got to play by the rules that the government's putting in place, right, which is around standardization of data, portability of data, etc. Right? So I think it's a challenge for those who exist in that ecosystem today, and it's also a huge opportunity to access a hitherto inaccessible class, right? So that's what I think we should be doing.
Got it. I know we have a few minutes still left. Would you like to sum up, your summary view in terms of how you see the stage of health tech today, and how do you see it evolving? And then I'll come to Ashutosh and Dr. Walia as well.
Now, look, my view is that I think we are starting to get to, when we started 1MG, I think even this journey seemed like a pie in the sky. And I think today we are very fortunate to be where we are. I do believe that e-pharmacies, e-diagnostics, integrated health tech platforms are here to stay a reality. We got a great boost in the arm when COVID happened, right? And I think a lot of healthcare disruption in the country didn't happen because of platforms like us. Online pharmacy, diagnostics became designated as essential services. And that was a huge moment of recognition for us. I think from here on out, each one of us and the whole healthcare ecosystem as a whole, and I don't mean online, offline, etc. I think just the whole healthcare ecosystem, we think there are bigger problems that can be solved, bigger problems in supply chain. I know there's tremendous amounts of supply chain innovation happening in the country. Just in the regulation side also, there's a lot of stuff happening from a manufacturing of, let's say, APIs, etc. in the country as well. But overall, there's just a lot of innovation happening in supply chain. There's talk about blockchain, non-repeatability of medicines, authenticity, ensuring that supply chain is kosher. There's a lot of that work happening. Even on the therapy side, I think we are starting to go deeper and deeper into therapies. People are building purely digital tools to help you diagnose disease conditions. It's starting with things like dermatology, but it's soon coming to aspects like mental health, etc. Right? So that's another huge initiative. So my view of the healthcare ecosystem is that we have scaled one mountain, but we have many more mountains to scale. And I think we are better prepared than we've ever been from a vision of, let's say, the country's government perspective, from a regulations perspective, from a healthcare startup ecosystem perspective, to actually go scale those mountains. And we are very, very excited about where we can go.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Ashutosh, what's your take on the topic?
So, I think I would agree with everything that Gaurav has said or Dr. Walia has said. I think, see, from my perspective, when I look at it now from the outside, and having spent a long time running a chain of pharmacies, technology is basically the enabler. And I don't think it will ever be a bottleneck for people in India. One, because we know the technology. Second, we understand it, and we are very quick to grab it as users. I think what is more important is delivery, whether it's insurance. Let's go one by one. To get an insurance claim passed in a hotel, in a hospital, it's a nightmare. And I'm sure people are aware of that. I went through this because I was admitted in hospital in COVID. Whether you look at any of the tests that you're trying to get, I think somewhere along the line, that delivery is of the service, whichever segment of healthcare we are in, needs to be looked at very closely. The third part is, we've spoken a lot about the supply chain, but I think the supply chain, we must still remember that almost 30% of the medicines in our country are still fake or underpowered. And I think we need to do this very carefully. I used to run the largest number of hospital pharmacy chains, and I know the nightmare that existed in the pharmacies inside government hospitals in UP and some of the other states. Nothing has changed. I think that needs to, because that's where the common man is going to be affected. And finally, I think doctors are still the superstars of the entire healthcare ecosystem. If a doctor takes a call on not using a particular medicine or not using a particular store or not using a particular facility, end of discussion. So I think that whole process needs to be managed a little more carefully, because I know almost every pharma player in whichever segment treats the doctor, because the doctor is the primary generator of all the revenues, with kid gloves. So I think there's a lot of potential, a lot of possibilities, a lot is happening, but I think a lot more needs to be done.
Well begun, but still a long way to go. Dr. Walia, what would be your closing thoughts, and especially given, I think, the fact that the government, unless the government really picks this up in a major way, which it has started to, it really will not make a difference to the majority of Indians. I think for that to happen, the government has to step in.
Yeah, health has been the state subject, and government is definitely very much involved with the delivery of healthcare, whether it is the regulators or whether it is the healthcare system, which goes up to the PHC level. So I think innovation definitely has a lot of potential. It's a game changer. In next few years, we will see the impact of it. We are already seeing how telemedicine became so common during the COVID times. Almost everyone was talking to their doctors online. And the way, the internet has made inroads into even the villages. So that, I think, holds a lot of potential. Besides that, I would just like to briefly touch on what are the innovations happening in the devices and the diagnostic space, especially. Diagnostics were earlier mostly imported in our country. But in last few years, what we have seen is that there's a lot of innovation happening within the country in the diagnostic space. And for that, we really need to create frameworks again, so that we are able to at least move those innovations from development to the user who need them. Because there are many innovations in the diagnostics which will really reduce the expenditure on drugs or therapy, especially related to cancer. There are many such examples. If you are able to find out whether the cancers are resistant to any of the drugs. So innovation in health sector is just beginning to happen, I think. And but one thing which I would definitely like to highlight here is that, the partnership with the current incumbent, that will be the key to the broad-based transformation that we are looking for in next few years. So keeping up with what we have right now and improvising on that would be the key to success, I think. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Walia, Ashutosh, Gaurav, thank you very much for joining this session and for giving us your valuable and interesting thoughts. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into ET India Boardroom. Stay tuned for more.
Hello and welcome to ET India Boardroom. On this panel, we will be discussing the question, is talent crunch the next big hurdle for Indian startups? We have a great set of panelists today from both the operating and investing side. And our panelists for today are Abhishek Gupta, who is Chief Customer Officer at Clevertap, Dipanshu Manchanda, who is founder and CEO at Zapfresh, and Vineet Bansali, who is Senior Vice President at Arise Venture Partners. So, to start things off, I'd actually like to test the premise of this question somewhat by asking each of you to share your thoughts on, are Indian startups actually facing a talent crunch? And if so, what in your opinions is driving it? So maybe Abhishek, maybe let me turn to you first and get your thoughts on that.
The talent crunch, or the challenge in terms of acquiring the talent and retaining the talent, is very real actually. So the problem statement that you said, Gustav, is very, very real. It's something that we are experiencing in our daily lives. There are really like what has happened over there has always been demand for talent. There has always been high demand for top talent, and companies have always paid a premium to go and get the talent. But what has happened over the last couple of years is we have seen two trends happening in parallel. On the one side, we have seen startups raising a huge amount of capital, which means that they've got a huge need to go ahead and build the products, the businesses, and for which they need the talent. On the second side, we have seen another trend, which is because of COVID, because of the pandemic, the employees ended up experiencing a totally different kind of work environment. At which point, in some of these cases, they got disconnected from the overall mission statement of the company. And in the process, they went out seeking new opportunities for themselves, where they could further their career, they could further the interest, they could learn new skills. And therefore, what has happened is today, hiring talent and retaining talent is a big part of the job at all levels. And we are seeing it all across, both within our company and with the customers that we work with, primarily in the consumer tech space.
And Dipanshu and Vineet, anything to add from your sides? Are you seeing the same in your specific sectors, industries? Any thoughts on the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think talent crunch has always been a major deterrent for growth for startups. When we started our journey, we faced it. As of today, it's still existing. It's growing as we are moving ahead with so much capital flowing in the companies. There are a lot of employees who are looking for brighter opportunities and getting more ambitious day by day. So that I believe is a posing threat to the startup industry as a whole, and we should be looking at making it more comforting for employees, to stay connected to a vision together and maybe contribute to a larger purpose rather than looking at opportunistic kind of ways to build their career. So I think as a whole, there is a lot of challenge in engineering and various other departments in the company, and how we address those challenges are very specific to each and every company, but they're there as a whole, and everybody's tackling that problem in their own way. One thing what we do is, despite of giving them more ownership about the roles which they are in, that definitely excites the workforce to do more and be more accountable and more responsible. That helps them stay the course and look at doing delivery at a long-term level. So that's what it is.
And Vineet, I think you have a bit of a unique perspective as well as a sort of early stage investor. I think you get to see this play out across multiple portfolio companies. Is this something that you're seeing happening from the very early stage of a sort of startup's growth, or is it more a problem for more late stage companies?
Absolutely. I agree with what Abhishek and Dipanshu said. They are the operators. I'm not an operator anymore. But we do have a bunch of startups in our portfolio. Everyone is scrambling. The founders are scrambling. They are making their investors scramble. This isn't anything new. The top 5% of talent has always been in demand, and the smartest founders know that 2 high-quality developers are worth 20 developers with maybe a little bit lesser experience or expertise. And I think all the other founders who didn't already know this are learning this lesson real quick. One thing I would say is this is just another critical, urgent, everything is burning item in the list of the early stage founders. They just have to now solve for this as well.
And Vineet, you touched on an interesting point where I think you just said getting 2 good developers is worth 20 good ones. And I think it's safe to say that a good developer is worth her or his weight in gold. Maybe turning to Dipanshu and Abhishek, do you see this being primarily a challenge in engineering and product, or does this span the entire sort of organization when it comes to a talent crunch? Let's say into, for example, commercial roles as well. Maybe Dipanshu, let me start with you.
I mean, I see across the departments. Engineering gets a little more limelight because of the high cost of salaries in that department, which is rising day by day. The other departments are also catching up. So I believe there is across the board, whether it is customer care or whether it is operations or business development, quality talent is not short of options in irrespective of whichever department you look at. But it's also about what is a critical function to the organization. And for some, if there is a core technology product, technology as a service or software as a service is, if you look at that, then they have engineering as a main department to really contribute, work at. For players like us, operations plays a key role. So we look at that as an important department, which has been not easy to fix when it comes to getting the right leader on board, and then creating that hierarchy as we grow forward. Because what we see is that the engagement part, the employee engagement part, the harmony alongside the productivity is equally important. When you have large workforces, there are a lot of challenges and complexities which a startup founder has to manage. So learning and maneuvering yourself out of that, and staying top of it with different set of problems and challenges coming from different departments, and creating that cohesiveness is becoming more challenging because of opportunities being out there. B, they're getting more demanding in terms of work-life balance, being hybrid. So a clutch of challenges is what we believe has always been there, and it's getting more and more day by day. So we're still looking at various ways to solve it. And of course we want to do better also for the employees' welfare, but we have our own challenges to basically work around that part.
Thanks, Pancho. And Abhishek, maybe from your perspective as chief customer officer, looking more at, let's say, the professional services side, customer success side of the business, are you also finding talent to be a challenge in your world as well?
So good talent always have options, and they always had it. They have it now, perhaps a little bit more options at this point. And so I can talk about broadly as a company, but I can also talk from my team standpoint. So in my team, I've got both set of roles. I've got technical roles and I have commercial roles. Now, when it comes to acquiring talent and retaining them, I think we're seeing the challenges are there. Like if I compare it with the previous years, of course, in the last couple of years, the challenges have been much more. But there are some nuances that we are seeing. So for example, when it comes to retaining employees, we're seeing consistency between the technical and business roles. But the one area where we see like hiring for technical roles is very challenging is because the drop-off rate from the time people accept the offer to the time they join, that is much higher in the technical roles compared to the commercial roles. And so that is one thing that we have seen. But also what we are seeing is when it comes to commercial roles, a lot of time people are actually based in a location where they're closer to the customer, where they're already close, like it's their own location. They don't really have to move around, or they don't have to think that at some point they have to move around. So that also acts as a sort of a way to kind of for people to go and appreciate the opportunity they have and then pick it up and run with it. But broadly, if I look at our situation as a company, we are a tech company and we have a whole lot of engineers, and we need a lot of engineers on an ongoing basis. So the overall impact has been significant in terms of going out to the market, trying and bringing the talent, make sure that they are really excited about the work they're doing, making sure that they're working on cutting edge technologies, making sure that they're actually able to learn and grow and build exciting careers with us. So that's an area where we are consciously investing energies, building processes, creating opportunities for people. And there is one more thing that I'll share, which is very interesting, since you spoke about the two roles. We have also created opportunities for people to move from sort of like if someone has been in a technical role, giving them an opportunity to move into a sort of a commercial role and moving people around in different functions. because that basically gives people a lot more holistic experience across different functions where they learn a lot. And for us, it allows us to create leaders of tomorrow.
And maybe a somewhat related follow-up question, which is, there's certainly the sort of functional angle, but we are in a very different world today than we were 2-3 years ago in terms of, COVID and work from home. Has the work from home world made it easier or harder in your experience to find, identify, acquire, and sort of retain top talent?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question actually, because this is now multi-layered. Hiring and retaining are two different sides of the same coin. So the fact that people have been able to pick up an opportunity from where they are located today, that has definitely enabled hiring. So hiring is a little bit more easier from that standpoint. But what has happened is because of the virtual environment, the level of engagement that used to exist between the teams, between employer and employees, it's not so much there. So now retaining employees has become really, really hard because like sometimes when people come in young, they really need to be groomed. They need to be taken care of in a nice professional environment. And the virtual world does not necessarily allow those opportunities every time. So retaining employees definitely is much harder at this point.
Yeah, I second that thought, Gustav. Basically, I think it's easier to hire across geographies. And we've hired some, few folks who are, even moving. So they keep moving to different states basis their own flexibilities and requirements. We as an organization don't mind that. We in fact promote being hybrid and being flexible because what I think is that people work more when we give them space. So it's a different level of motivation, different level of understanding which we have, and even if they are less engaged, but they're more enriched with the right work and the right role and responsibility, then they tend to be more responsible and accountable of what needs to be done. Otherwise, there are different type of people, but we think that being hybrid is a good thing, with some challenges in engagement, but the real guys stay.
Got it. And I guess embedded in the premise of the question is this a hurdle for Indian startups? So Vineet, I think again your perspective is welcome here because you see so many early stage companies and you sort of get to follow them through their growth trajectories. We've established there is a talent crunch. We've established that it sort of spans across functions. Where does this sort of land with startups? Is it in cost of growth, pace of growth? What challenges does it really present to Indian startups?
Answered another way, the founders who can crack tech hiring have a significant competitive advantage, right? Being able to come to an investor and be able to pitch that you have a ready network, maybe from people you went to college with or people you worked with at previous startups, or you were part of some deep tech meetups and hence you built those networks, is now actually a significant competitive advantage. And as investors, at least we do, when you're evaluating a team on various credentials, do they have an understanding of the domain? Do they have an understanding of the tech? We now actually filter to ensure that the founding team, the co-founders, have an ability to quickly build a team around them. Because you will otherwise see a founder who he or she has raised a couple of $1 million, right? Because they've got the right ACADs, they've got the right skill set. And now the money is sitting in the bank because they are unable to, get the team around them, right? And the product's going to suffer. So it's a reverse problem. And that's actually a filter that investors have begun applying.
And maybe a follow-up question for you as an investor: when you look at let's say an early stage business plan, and does talent as let's say a more constrained talent environment factor into how much capital you think a company will need, to growth projections? Do you see any sort of adjustment in the way you invest on the back of this sort of talent crunch beyond what you just mentioned in terms of looking at talent acquisition as a competitive differentiator?
Gustav, so one of the things that we now do is we advise startups on something as simple, especially early stage founders, on something as simple as why they need an ESOP pool, right? To people like us in the industry who are experienced, it's fairly natural. But a lot of early founders think an ESOP pool is something I need at a Series B or a Series C. And we have to get them to come to terms saying that, hey, you got this money, but the talent isn't just going to come if you give them a higher, CTC, right? A higher compensation. You need to compensate them with ESOPs. So this is an example of how we do work with founders to explain to them why this is important.
And maybe, Abhishek, let me turn to you with a question as well, which is, we'll talk in a second about what companies can do to improve how they acquire and retain talent. Do you think there's anything at more of a, let's call it broader level, that either from an ecosystem standpoint that can be done to improve the availability of talent or how we hire for startups in India?
Yeah, no, there is definitely a lot that can be done, because I think what we're really, one of the critical aspects, and this is a classic thing that happens with all hiring managers, is everyone wants to have talent that can be readily productive from day one. Like when you go about writing the spec, right? Everyone spends time writing the perfect spec, and we interview a whole lot of people to get the perfect candidate. But what we have to recognize that when we're trying to build a company, and when you're trying to build a company for the long run, you have to have a combination of talent. You have to have talent that can come and readily become productive, but you also have to have talent which basically can be groomed and can perform over a longer period of time. And so from an ecosystem standpoint, there is definitely a lot of opportunity to work on the second aspect, where industry can collaborate with institutions, whether it be in the training area, in the academic area, and make sure that individuals can be trained in the relevant skill set. So I'll give you an example, right? Like a lot of times, if you look at our engineering curriculum, what people learn, right? There is a lot of emphasis on, let's say, programming languages like Java, Python, etc., right? But suddenly a mobile tech company needs talent. You need someone who has experience of developing an Android application, an iOS application. And there's a gap that exists. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity to bridge that gap through better collaboration by making sure that what industry needs, that information is being disseminated to the broader ecosystem, and that collaboration happens. And then industry also, like employers such as ourselves, and we do that consciously, where we hire people knowing fully well that it would take us a certain amount of time to groom them, to help them succeed. And that helps us create a stronger workforce when we look at the medium to longer term time frame.
Very helpful, Abhishek. And maybe one thing I wanted to ask you, I think you've had a bit of an international perspective too, is we have seen, I don't think the talent problem is unique to India. We have seen it play out in other markets at various points in time. Are there any lessons we can pull from other markets, be it the US, Israel, Europe, in terms of how this plays out and where we end, or how we, let's call it, resolve this?
Thanks, Gustav. I think that's a super pertinent question. Founders need to learn from every place they can. I've got a couple of interesting data points here, right? Everyone knows WhatsApp had a massive, exit to Facebook. It was $21 billion. What a lot of people don't know is their entire tech team was less than 50 people, right? Another company that had an IPO in the UK recently, Hims and Hers, had a total team of under 150 people on the date they went public, right? Now, what founders need to learn from this is work towards optimizing your tech talent and optimizing your product and making product decisions so your go-to-market and your growth is not affected, but maybe you sort of figure out what features need to come in today, what features need to come in later. About 20 years ago, hardware was the pain point across the world, right? I mean, buying a server cost $1 bazillion in the US, in UK, in China, and in India. Today, thanks to cloud, that's not a problem anymore. But across geographies, talent is. And this problem is not going away. A decade ago, the Israeli government highlighted that there's a shortage of highly skilled computer science personnel. 10 years ago, this was a problem in Israel. In 2017, there was another article, with a headline saying, Israel startups complaining about tech talent crunch, right? So 2012, 2017, 5 years, nothing changed. This year, 2022, there's a Wired article Israeli startups complaining about a tech talent crunch, right? So there's now a 10-year history, published history of tech talent in a geography like Israel. Now, sure, India has more geographic breadth. We are a larger country, more people, but that top 5% of tech talent is always going to be in demand. And we have to live with the fact that this is not going to change in the short to medium term. And there are other solutions, right, that founders need to put in. And combine this with the fact that an early stage founder in India is this year competing with 100+ unicorns for that same tech talent. Maybe 5 years ago, you were only competing with 10 unicorns, right? Big lesson is founders now, I think, should hire a full-time recruiter as one of their first 3 or 4 hires the moment they get even their first angel round in the bank.
I think that's super interesting, Vineet. I think actually getting an HR person, I think has typically been associated, or HR maybe broadly, but or talent lead has always been, I think, regarded as something you do when you're a much larger company. But these days, I don't think you can maybe afford to wait. So I guess the analog suggests that the talent crunch is here to stay. It's a permanent state of affairs, not a short-term phenomenon. With that in mind, I guess companies have to adapt, and I think many are already. So, Dipanshu, let me turn to you. I guess you've been dealing with this challenge, like all of us have for some time. What have you seen? What have you maybe seen, or what have you maybe yourself implemented that has helped you sort of retain talent, acquire it, et cetera? What has worked? What hasn't worked? Some tips maybe for the founders out there looking to solve their talent challenges.
So I think I give them a lot of space in terms of the way they want to operate, a lot of independence and freedom to really work, across geographies, or whether it is with respect to role and responsibilities, the stuff they want to crack, and I also throw a lot of problems, within the teams to see who can really come up with the right solutions. That I think is a more learning orientation, where they feel really part of a bigger opportunity than just being given a small piece to solve in larger organizations. So particularly folks who want to work on complex problems. So my focus has always been to spot those guys, rather than something which already exists and they just want to scale it up. So a problem and solution orientation, and also freedom and space in terms of how they want to work and what they want to do works almost all the time for me. And you have pros and cons in different set of leaderships, but I think this one is my style of working.
Abhishek, how about from your fund at CleverTap? What have you seen work as the organization has evolved? Yeah, I know you're distributed across multiple hubs, so I think you also have the challenge of distribution to deal with.
Yeah, no, definitely. We are based across, we have employees across the globe, but of course across multiple cities in India. But in terms of what we have been focusing on in terms of making sure that our employees are doing well, and we are able to basically provide talent the opportunity to succeed, we're really focusing on 3 things. One is people want to have a sense of purpose in what they're doing. That's really the first thing. And what we have done is during the course of this pandemic, at every possible opportunity, we have tried to get together with the people to make sure that we're sharing with them the purpose, the energy of all the things that we are doing, and making sure that what they do stacks up in the entire scheme of things. So we have taken every opportunity to ensure that our employees know that what they're doing matters and how it matters. So the sense of purpose is there. The second part is there is a renewed emphasis on learning at this point in terms of learning, solving challenging problems and whatnot. And so people want they want to learn new things. They want to have some amount of diversity in the work they're doing. And they've been very conscious in making sure that people have that opportunity, whether it comes from role change, whether it comes from learning new skills, or sponsoring additional things for them, right? Additional courses, mentorship, whatever. And the third area where we are really kind of intentional about is like in the days when your grocery can be delivered in 10 minutes, your food can be delivered in 10 minutes. We need to recognize that the talent expectations are also changing in terms of recognitions, promotions, and whatnot. So we have been very intentional in terms of recognizing and rewarding the top talent to make sure that they not only stay, but are able to contribute in a lot more meaningful manner.
Fantastic. And Vineet, maybe let me turn to you and ask the same question, but maybe let me add a dimension to it, which is in addition to what companies can do to help sort of, let's say, ameliorate the situation, what can investors do to help?
Great. Gustav, I actually want to split this into two parts, if I may, right? I wear the hat of having been a founder for the first 16 years of my career, and I've only been an investor for 3 years, right? So, what one fix that, I see no one speaking about, right? Maybe in our own portfolio, maybe others who are talking about it on LinkedIn or on podcasts is, what are they doing to make their startups a better place to work at? Because everyone else is doing a lot of the same things, right? So while founders love to read books like Lean Startup and, 0 to 1, I implore founders, in fact, I challenge them to get out of their comfort zone and read books like Culture Code and maybe, $1 Trillion Coach, and understand what the top players of the game, when I say the top players, I'm talking Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, because they have had a tech hiring crunch between them for multiple decades now, right? What they have done to truly, accelerate past the pack, right, and get ahead of the race. Get out of the comfort zone and, start learning, because this is not comfortable. Most founders are techies, and the obvious solution is a technical solution, right? Let's optimize or let's solve in a codified step-by-step manner. But get to these softer skills quicker, and don't wait to be a larger organization before culture is a conversation, right? Because at the end of the day, everyone can give or match the same CTC. So then what else can you do? And I think there are very few founders who will be able to do this right, and they'll have a huge competitive advantage. Sorry, didn't mean to take away from.
No, very helpful. And I guess in your other hat as an investor, is there anything that Arias does or that you think investors can do to help portfolio companies in this respect?
Absolutely. 3 things come to mind very clearly. Number one, the role of an investor becoming a Rolodex provider, right? And apologies to the younger audience who don't know what a Rolodex is, but maybe I'll explain it a different way. The role of an investor providing access to their contact list becomes even more critical, right? A lot of investors don't do this, or they don't do it actively, but I think it's time to do it actively. Even before the founder comes to you with a problem, you need to be able to anticipate this and make those connections. Second, I think investors, because they are more horizontal across so many startups, are the best place to showcase best practices and cross-pollinate ideas across their portfolio companies. Right? A lot of investors, especially at Orias, we never invest in competing startups. So this cross-pollination becomes even more natural, right? Because the people you're talking to and you're learning from are not in the same space and competing with you. Thirdly, in the same line, is create opportunities and spaces for conversations between your senior founders in your portfolio and the younger founders in your portfolio. Right, the guys who have gone from hiring the first 10, tech first 10 member tech team to people who are now trying to hire 100, right? They may be struggling at 100, but they definitely solved how to go from 0 to 10 people. So, and that opportunity and that space needs to be created by the investor. So don't wait for your founders to come and say, hey, can you connect me with this founder of a unicorn in your portfolio? Create those conversations, create those spaces. I'll leave it at that.
And maybe to round things off, Dipanshu, as a founder who's raised capital here, anything that your investors do that maybe Vineet hasn't mentioned, or that you think they can do more of to help you in this situation?
No, I agree with Vineet. I think we haven't seen a lot of action in those directions. With our set of investors, they've been mostly passive investors who financially help you and then pull back and see you create magic. So I think there is a very limited engagement when it comes to cross learning and referencing and a knowledge sharing between their portfolio. I personally believe it's very easy to do for them, and it's highly productive. But somehow, for whatever reason, we haven't seen that happening. So I would have wished to see this coming from our set of guys, but unfortunately we haven't gotten that. So I think a lot of investors also need to pull up socks and help the founders now, and get their hands dirty a little bit, if not too much, in solving the challenges of and they do have the capability also, but I think it's a matter of what priorities do they have, and what is their working style and investment thesis overall.
On behalf of all VCs everywhere, I absolutely agree. There is a lot as a community we investors need to do, and we have been slower than the founders would like. And I think 2022 is a great year to have that conversation, to push that conversation and that envelope forward. I am for sure going to write a couple of LinkedIn posts and maybe have this conversation over drinks with other VCs, and hoping this will become a tidal wave of positive action very quickly.
Oh, it'll be great, Vineet. Trust me, it'll be such a fresh air, which we will look at, coming from you guys.
Perfect. I wanted to say thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for making time. I think this has been a super interesting discussion. Maybe at some point we'll check in a year or two down the line and see if things have gotten better or not, and maybe we made some progress. But I want to say thank you all for joining today and for tuning into ET India Boardroom. Stay tuned for more.
In August 2019, the US Business Roundtable, BRT, published its revised statement on the purpose of a corporation. It was signed by nearly 200 CEOs of large corporations. It conveyed that a corporation's purpose was no longer to maximize shareholder value, but to serve all stakeholders. This was a big shift from the long-held status quo. Since then, purpose has triggered a lot of debate and discussion. It has its share of cheering supporters who welcomed it and vehement critics who argued that since pledging support to the idea of purpose, not all CEOs have managed to walk the talk. So what do purpose-driven organizations look like? How are they different? How do their boardrooms set their agenda to keep ahead of the curve? Hi, I'm Aloni Bhatt, and welcome to this special chat with Karan Singh, the managing partner of Bain & Company's India offices, on defining boardroom agendas for purpose-driven organizations of the future. Karan was among the team that set up Bain's India business in 2006 and has more than 25 years of management consulting experience across APAC and the United States. Karan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Melanie. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So Karan, as you've told us, you've been with Bain since 1998, and you've had a long, eventful journey in India along with Bain, 16 years. What would you say are the highlights, and what's your measure of the impact that Bain's had?
Thanks, Melanie. It's been an extremely fulfilling journey. It's gone, in a nutshell, it's a startup to scale story. The journey has been one where we've been very clear about building an enduring and a distinct institution in India. And so as a result, we have truly focused on our balance sheet in making sure we build a sustainable business across multiple verticals. We have been really focused on making sure we played and we were at the premium end of the segment. So the quality of the portfolio in terms of clients who we work with are just top-notch and marquee clients who we are very proud to be associated with. We are leading on multiple areas and we are innovating quite substantially. And we are proud of the culture in terms of the people and the brand that we have created, which is critical to any business and more so in today's environment. And we feel it is all our responsibilities to also be a responsible citizen. So we do a lot when it comes to the community and giving back. So it's been a fantastic journey for us. We have, from being new to the market, we are leading the market in multiple segments. We have the leading position with financial investors. We lead with consumers, with the consumer products companies. We lead in IT services, and we are doing probably the most amount of significant work with digital insurgents and the disruptors. It's been a story also of rapid and responsible growth and of getting to scale. We will be over 50 partners, about 700 consultants over 3 offices, and we've gone to being the largest office in APAC for Bain & Company. So we're very proud of the innovations also in terms of not only serving key winners of India, of corporate India, but just making sure we're at the forefront of working on cutting-edge topics that people really care about and are investing behind. So it's been a fantastic journey, and I feel really proud to have been part of this.
And we wish you continued success. From your vantage current, this is linked to my next question. The pandemic hit businesses' livelihoods, and it pushed companies to innovate. It accelerated, as you pointed out, the shift to digitization. In the long term and the short term, what do you think are the drivers for growth when it comes to Indian businesses that you think boardrooms need to capitalize on?
Miloni, I'm very optimistic about the future, especially the mid to the longer term. We are seeing unprecedented levels of disruption. We are seeing tremendous superabundance of capital in terms of money that's sitting out on the sidelines that is looking to be invested in good businesses. And we are seeing boldness by founders and companies like we've never seen before. So that's a combination of those three throws up huge opportunities for breakout growth for many of the companies that we are working with. Having said that, I think there is also tremendous volatility and uncertainty in the near term because of the input shocks in terms of what's happening on food and fuel and the geopolitical issues. So I think there will be turbulence in the next 6 to 9 months that we will have to weather. But I think the opportunity thereafter of reshaping portfolios, of making big bets for the future is very substantial. In our research, Miloni, it's quite interesting. We find that during turbulent times, the moves people make, the moves companies make, provides a tremendous opportunity to reshuffle the deck and reshuffle strategic positions. We see the difference between winners and losers quite substantial in terms of changes made during times of turbulence. So this is a great time for for companies to reshape their portfolios, make some bets, and think about the future. But at the same point, we have to be thinking about managing the near term. So there is a agenda about delivering for today and delivering for today and developing the business for tomorrow. There are multiple mega trends that people are focusing on. I'll just mention a few of them. The biggest one really by far is transformations. And that's a combination of people looking at burning ambition and a burning platform. As you rightly mentioned, I think digital is a disruptive opportunity. And I think COVID has led everyone to agree that everyone needs to accelerate digital and think about how do we capture the benefits of digital transformations. We're seeing corporates reshape their portfolios in terms of mergers and acquisitions, in terms of looking at engine 2s and engine 3s. There is an important agenda, as I mentioned, about efficiency in the near term to fund the growth that we talked about. The people agenda, the talent agenda, and thinking about the future-ready operating model is a key imperative given all the challenges on the talent side. And I think we've moved from a balance of power from capital to more towards labor and good talent. And I think there is a tremendous important opportunity when it comes to ESG and thinking about doing good to society. So I think it's a very packed agenda. These are turbulent times, but also very attractive times for the future.
So, given all that you've told us, any advice to businesses looking to tap the Indian markets, with a focus on innovating for India, acknowledging the country's potential and the country's peculiarities?
I think, are you talking more about MNCs, Meloni? So I think the MNCs have to decide their strategy first and foremost in India. And I think it either one commits completely to the Indian market or does not. So it's a go big or go home strategy. Having said that, I think being careful and being deliberate about defining the strategic playing field, I think is quite important. We've seen very successful MNCs stay at the premium end and play the premium niche game. We've seen others like Samsung and Cadbury play the masstige game. We've seen others, play the mass game like an LG or an Oppo. And then we've seen the comprehensive players like an HUL, like a GSK. So I think being clear about one's strategy in terms of where to play, I think is the starting point. Having said that, I think the how to win and the business model choices are probably more important or equally important. We need to be thinking about value propositions in India that are attractive to the Indian consumer. It's about what is the offering which is truly distinct and valuable to the Indian consumers. It's about how do we make sure we are delivering and creating the capabilities when it comes to go-to-market, when it comes to customer engagement, which is what the customers are truly looking for. And then I think it's very important here not only to think about market-facing capabilities, but the operating model is quite make or break here in terms of the support from global. It's about thinking about the right levels of funding and investments, and it's having an empowered, dedicated teams in India that can take calls and truly make sure we are innovating for India. Another choice a lot of MNCs are making is it India for India, or is it India for the region, or is it India for the globe? So there are opportunities to leverage capabilities in India, whether it's on the back end, whether it's on the talent side, whether it's on the knowledge side, to think about tapping global opportunities. But it's an important point I think you raise, which is let's be clear on the strategy and let's be clear on how does one win in a market which is quite competitive, and making sure we are delivering very clear, distinct value propositions and investing to localize the business and make sure we are creating an operating model that is finely tuned for the Indian opportunities. So I think it's a very important point for MNCs. We've seen MNCs decide that they will not play in the market, or they will look at other markets. On the other hand, we've seen MNCs triple down on India, given the large market that's available and the opportunity for exports as well.
Okay. Karan, I want to shift focus now, to the topic at hand. Employees are asking, how am I making a difference? How do I make an impact? And people want purpose, and they want to make this difference beyond just shoring up the company bottom line. Do you see, from your vantage, companies wanting that too? And are they being able to walk the talk?
It's a very good question. I think companies have to be purpose-oriented in today's environment to succeed. If we cannot attract, retain, and get the talent to thrive, there is no business. We are all going to be constrained, and we're not going to be competitive in this environment. So I think a purpose-oriented business is an absolute must. Some of the data that we are seeing and some of the trends globally are quite interesting and quite revealing. If you step back a little bit, Meloni, what's going on is, if you go back from the industrialized times to today, there is a perceptible shift across markets and across generations of moving from survival to providing more meaning in one's life. And then people, when we look at jobs, and we look at what people are solving for, only about 22% of employees really rank compensation as a number one criterion. So there are lots of other attributes that people are looking for in companies to stay and work and spend their professional careers. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity for companies to truly create what we would call a compass, which is a North Star of what they stand for and what's the big purpose of why they exist, of creating a bold vision and mission, making sure very distinct spiky capabilities for them to survive, but very importantly, the values of what the organization stands for in terms of providing the right opportunities, running the business in the right manner that people care about, giving back to the community, and doing good, and also thinking about the environment when it comes to elements like ESG. We've seen people start to focus on the environment part, but much less so on the societal part. So I think all of that needs to be holistically taken to really create purpose-oriented businesses. I think those who would do it will have tremendous competitive advantage in attracting and retaining the best talent. It's also what we're seeing is a fascinating change where I think we need to be thinking about providing heterogeneous opportunities or heterogeneous environments for people who are solving for very different needs. We did this very interesting study globally across 20,000 employees. And what we find is there are probably 6 different archetypes of what people are looking for. And so it is not a one size fits all. So we need to be thinking about how do we create the environment for operators, for givers, for strivers, for artisans, for explorers, for pioneers. So I think the benefit of just thinking about appealing to different talent groups in a purpose-oriented manner and giving them the right opportunity for them to thrive will make a huge difference. But this is a big challenge also for corporates who are navigating this environment.
Especially if you have to create that environment within one company, right? To communicate the heterogeneity as well. But I think that is my question. Are companies able to communicate purpose to employees?
I think it's less about, I think communication is important, the narrative is important. I think it's even more important of actually actions and making sure this is integrated into the strategy. Mm-hmm. So the compass or the purpose or what we stand for needs to be truly integrated in terms of business decisions and business operations. Let me give you a small example. If you think about Unilever, right? Hindustan Unilever, they're very clear. I mean, they're one of the winners in India's market. And again, back to the earlier question about MNCs and how MNCs have truly localized and Indianized to win in India. I think Unilever and what Sanjeev has done is exceptional. But what they've done with their purpose orientation is truly make that part of the way they operate. It's the way of life. It's part of their strategy, and it's also the way they operate. If you think about CSR, what Unilever has done is they've taken CSR and infused that within their core business. So they are making a difference to society. This project Suvidha that you may have heard about, which is all about hygiene and impacting the slums of Dharavi, is doing good for society, but it's part of what the business managers have their own KPIs. So it's about making a difference. It's about doing good, and it's about also impacting business. These are not at odds. So I think it's important to go beyond the narrative and beyond the communication to truly make sure we are walking the talk, we are taking the calls, making the investments, and living living the purpose. And I think anyone who does that, companies who do that, will thrive in tomorrow's environment.
On this point, I was reading FT.com, and there was a piece by Stefan Stern in which he quoted a professor at the Michigan Ross Business School. I think it was Professor Jerry Davis, who said, and I quote, that purpose cannot solve the problem of shareholder primacy because shareholder capitalism is inherently corrupting of purpose. And then he wrote, when purpose and shareholder value get into a boxing ring, I will always bet on shareholder value every time. So what are your thoughts on this, Karan? Though you said that they are not at odds.
Miloni, I think we need to think, go beyond shareholders to stakeholders. And I think the returns and thinking about TSR or total shareholder returns is important. But I think when we add and think about all the stakeholders, the purpose of a company has to be to its consumers, has to be to its community, has to be to its employees, and has to be to its investors. We need to be thinking holistically. And I think the companies that are thinking of all the stakeholders and thinking about how do we run a business that truly has an objective function across stakeholders is the point I was making. So shareholder returns, I'm not suggesting is not important, but I think what I'm saying is the importance of the other stakeholders have to be dialed up, and we need to be thinking holistically on what do we do with employees to truly become the best place to work. And that's where we need to be appealing to employees and providing a culture and a way of working, which is what people are looking for. We need to be thinking about the communities when it comes to elements of ESG and truly investing behind, do good and make sure how that goes alongside, good. If one does good and one does appeal to the right talent, it is also not at odds with good businesses. So I'm a believer that shareholder value needs to be the core element of what we're solving for, and we need to be thinking more holistically. Shareholder returns is going to be one important component of that.
All right. With that, Karan Singh, thank you so very much for your time and for your thoughts today.
Great. Lovely to chat, Miloni. Take care.
Thank you very much. See you soon. The talent war is fierce, and startups are definitely facing the heat. There is a choke on funding too, which will put some pressure on the momentum. Technology, digitization, a more conducive environment for business has spurred the startup ecosystem and has opened up several opportunities for growth, investment, and inclusion. It is an opportunity that must be nurtured. That's it from me, Miloni Bhatt, and all of us here at Economic Times India Inc Boardroom.